I appreciate your coming. This is mainly an opportunity for questions and answers again, but to report on progress. Many of you will know that we had suspended classes for nearly 2 weeks, and the purpose was to do everything we could to engage with staff and students, particularly the groups leading the protests, and to avoid having to open the campus with security on the campus, because we know that that's not desirable as a learning environment, and it can sometimes make it harder to keep a peaceful campus. We had intense negotiations right up to Sunday evening, and unfortunately in the end we could not find agreement. I think we found agreement on most of the substantive issues. The main one was to call for an institutional reconciliation commission, a process that we would jointly establish with all of the stakeholders, so that various different student groups, not just the student group that we were that was leading the protest, but also other student groups and other staff groups. And we would establish an agenda, a scope for such an institutional reconciliation process. We would agree on panelists, and I will say we actually had already suggested 4 panelists on whom we had agreed, although it was necessary for other stakeholders, not part of that process, to be brought in order to agree on panelists. We had agreed on a time frame, and that we would start immediately this week with assembling the panelists and refining the scope of the terms of such an institutional reconciliation process. What we could not get agreement on was an acceptance that the campus should open in parallel with that process. In other words, that while establishing the Institutional Reconciliation Commission and while it was getting off the ground, that we should continue our classes. And the emphasis that I have been repeating over the week, which is that not completing the academic year is disastrous for everyone, it's disastrous for higher education, it's disastrous for this year's school leavers who want to come into university, and it's disastrous for the many students we have, the thousands, I would say the overwhelming majority, who wish to complete their degrees and wish to progress to the next year of study, and for whom this would be an extra year of expenses if they could not finish their studies. So that message did not get through. The fact that we could achieve all the other objectives of an Institutional Reconciliation Commission in parallel with continuing our studies did not get through. There are, of course, national issues such as the call for free education. That was not central to our discussions because I think that the students have accepted that that's not something that the university has control over. And so that can't be made a condition of opening the campus. We've made clear that we believe the process that the Minister and the President have embarked on is too slow. We've supported the call that should be concluded and resolved this year, before the end of 2016, so that the consequences for budgets can already be incorporated into the 2017 budget and therefore into the fees for 2018. Otherwise, we will find ourselves in this situation again, where we have no plan for whether fees should increase or not, and by how much, and where the government is scrambling around to find money from other departments in order to avoid a fee increase. To avoid all of that, we need to have resolution of the policy by the end of this year. We've called for that, and the students do not think that's enough. The one student group in particular demands that we should support free education for everyone. We do not support that at present, but we did say that we're always open to hearing the arguments, just as we hope they will be open to hearing the arguments of why we think that free education for the poor and affordable education for the middle and lower income, but with the richer students having to pay full fees, why that is the appropriate policy. We did then therefore open yesterday. It was, I would say, a partial success. Most classes started and happened, but many classes were still disrupted. That happened because we are trying to scale the security level up in a very gradual way. We do not want to bring on the heavy security and provoke violence. We are responding to the level of disruption that the protest groups are demonstrating, And in our view, that is diminishing. So yesterday we had one level of security. We were not able to run the buses. Today we have opened the campus. There are no barricades. All of the shuttle buses are running, which means students can get from the remote residences onto the campus. All classes are running, although some have still been disrupted, but we've been able to confine that, I think, to a limited number of disruptions. Again, I'm very pleased that the private security on campus has demonstrated remarkable restraint and professionalism and has not provoked violence. But I also want to give credit to the student protesters, that while there has been some intimidation in classrooms to disrupt the lectures, there has not been violence. There have been isolated incidents of violence, but there's not been significant violence or vandalism. And I plead with the protesters to maintain the level of protest at that level. So I think we've made excellent progress today, and hopefully again tomorrow we will be able to function fully. Today the libraries this morning have not yet been opened. The libraries are particularly difficult to secure because any student with a card can go into the library. We have no way of knowing in advance which students going through the turnstiles are going to gather once inside and disrupt the library's functioning. And we don't want to send security into the libraries to remove people. So for now the libraries have been closed, but as the day progresses, I hope we will open them today. If not today, then tomorrow. That's the status quo, and I should perhaps just add one more thing. In the course of managing the protests, 8 students have been arrested, 6 yesterday for disrupting a class and intimidating people, 2 today for repeatedly re-establishing barricades, for intimidation, and one of them happens to be a student who is interdicted from being on campus, and so he is also arrested for being in contravention of a court order. Those charges, these are all alleged. Let me emphasize, the charges are still being formulated by the police, and for any further details on that you would have to ask the police. The police conducted the arrests, not us. We also have initiated disciplinary action, that's internal disciplinary action, against these students, all 8 of them. But in addition, there have been some students who have not been arrested, who are alleged to have committed offences, such as, for example, using their student cards to allow people into buildings who should not be allowed into buildings. That is an offence, and we are initiating some disciplinary charges against them. And that's all for now, and I'm open to answering any questions.
Please identify yourselves.
Any questions? I hope I'm so perfectly clear that nothing is left.
Vanessa Pooner from the SABC. I've been speaking to protesting student group leaders. They are saying that they are open to further discussions with you. Is that process of communicating with the protesting group ongoing? I know they marched to Bremner building this afternoon, also saying that they want to continue talks and dialogue with you. Is that happening anytime this week?
Well, it hasn't happened yet. We haven't had an approach from them. They have our emails, we have theirs. We indicated when the talks broke down on Sunday night that we remained open and we'll meet them anytime. But now there is a condition. The condition is they call off the shutdown and we will meet with them. There is no reason to continue with the shutdown in order to have talks. They should call on students to stop disrupting lectures, and we will be talking. They already know what we've been offering, and in fact it's on the web. The agreement that we came close to signing is on the web. What I'd mentioned before, which was the offer, in fact the initiative of an Institutional Reconciliation Commission, is there. If they wish to make amendments to that, we're certainly open to talking about it. They need to understand, though, that it is not that we will not stop classes until that happens. We will continue classes while that happens.
Sorry, Doctor, just for my clarity, that Reconciliation Commission, will that then also be dealing with I think it was the number was 12 students that were, some of them expelled and suspended? Is that what that process will entail?
It would. Those are the terms of reference which we have not completely worked out. but the plan was certainly that the proposal was certainly that it should include a review of the protests that happened in February around the shack, and all the consequences of those protests, which includes 12 students who were either interdicted or disciplined. Most of those disciplinary cases are now concluded. In fact, they're all but one are concluded. And so that would be part of the IRC process. Those students have been expelled or rusticated. And if an internal reconciliation process, an institutional reconciliation process, overseen by external people, who I hope would include judges and other people, came to the view that there should be some sort of amnesty granted based on that, we would agree to be bound by that, but it would have to be a process that has been approved and has credibility.
Doctor, sorry for my ignorance, but one more thing that keeps on popping up when you speak to the students. They're talking about a number of 37 contract workers that were left out of the insourcing process on campus. I just need some clarity on what exactly the situation is, because they're mentioning that when they talk about the reasons for protest, that forms part of the reasons as well.
I think they may be talking, so I'm not sure because I'm not sure what they said to you, but I think they're talking about on the campus we have independent vendors, mostly food outlets, little restaurants. They rent space from us and they are entirely independent. We have no contract with them except that they rent the space. And those food vendors employ caterers, workers. And the students are demanding, we think quite unreasonably, that we should take over those vendors and that those workers should be employed by the university. We don't believe that that's an appropriate thing to do at all. It would mean there would be no variety of food on campus, no choice, and also we think these are often small mom and pop shops and stores. They provide opportunities for lots of small enterprises to do business on campus. That, I understand, is the main call. So if there are any other workers concerned, then they need to spell out who those are and why they think they should be insourced. We have insourced, there were 6 big companies. Nearly 5 of them have been concluded. There are almost 1,000 workers from 5 of the companies. There's one company called C3, a catering company, where the process will be concluded in the next few months in consultation with the trade union that represents those workers and with the management of those companies. There's nothing that we've said that suggests that we're trying to stall or delay that. And why would we? We've agreed and committed to the insourcing of them as well.
Next question, please.
Can I just ask one more question there?
Sure.
There is an allegation that the...
Don't you just identify yourself?
All right, it's Mlambi from SABC Radio. There is a clear allegation that the university is spending 6 million on private security, whereas that money could be diverted. One, is that a fact that you're spending so much on private security? 2, is it possible that that money could be diverted elsewhere?
I don't know where they get that figure from, but our average cost, if we are to maintain the level of security that we have at the moment, the average cost would be about 1 million rand a month. And so over 6 months, if we needed to maintain it for a long time, would be 6 million. We hope that this will be a month. We did not need private security on campus since the beginning of March. We've had no private security on campus, or almost none. So we've not been spending anything until this recent escalation of protests. Could the money be spent on something else? It depends what you mean. We dig into our reserves, our small reserves, or we borrow money in order to fund this. When you say, for example, if you wanted to spend it on financial aid or on more staff in the student wellness center, those would become recurrent costs. In other words, you would have to spend that every month forever into doing that. We would not have the regular income to do that. So we would not take money from this, which we need to keep in reserve anyway in case we need this security or something else. We would not take money from this to spend it on something else. But there's another more important and equally important issue. We insure our buildings, we insure our buses, we insure our property. The insurance says to us, if you don't take every reasonable measure to protect your property, we will not pay out that insurance if it's damaged. So if we didn't provide that security and a building burnt down, as has happened on many other campuses, the insurance would say, did you take all reasonable measures to protect it? And if we could not show that we had brought security on to protect it, then the 100 million that we would need, or the 200 million to replace the building, would not be covered. So this is a kind of insurance as well that protects us from a much more serious cost.
Sorry to repeat if the question has been posed before. I'm just curious to know, is there an end in sight for this impasse, or a decision has been taken whether to continue as it was pronounced over the weekend to continue?
Yeah, the decision was taken on Sunday night when everything else broke down that we are continuing and classes are open, and as far as possible we're committed to doing that. At the same time, the decision is open to negotiate and talk with student leaders or others who wish to talk with us. The door is always open, because we don't want to stay in this perpetual state of security to protect the classes for a long time, or for at all. So we still want to find an acceptable solution to the problem. We're always open to talking.
Doctor, just perhaps another question from me, sorry if there's no one else. Just in terms of numbers of academic staff that are also speaking with the students in terms of not continuing the academic program whilst these protests are still going on, what is the situation with that at UCT?
Well, I'm not sure what you've heard. The deans are all fully supportive of the lectures continuing. There have been some particular pockets. One, for example, is in the School of Fine Art and Drama at Hidding Campus, where there are some issues which I would call domestic issues. There are issues that relate to the particular campus and the courses offered there, and those are being dealt with, and we've accepted that while that's been dealt with, if it's more constructive to suspend lectures while that's been resolved, then those lectures can be suspended, and I think they still are suspended. There's been an issue at the medical school where the dean and the deputy deans have been in discussion for the last week with a group of health science students about issues that they have. And they have encouraged us not to insist that lectures start. Lectures did start yesterday, in fact. So they have restarted, and students are out in the hospitals and they're working. But we're letting the dean manage that process. So there will be some isolated areas, but the norm, the general thing, is that lectures continue. Of course, let me just say, and maybe this is what you're referring to, if a lecturer at any point feels intimidated or feels that their safety or their students' safety is at risk because protesters have invaded a classroom and we haven't had security there, they must evacuate the class. No one must be put at risk over this.
Thank you.
Paul Willen from News 24. It seems that the university and the protesting students are at somewhat of a stalemate regarding this parallel process of opening the university, but also establishing the GRC process.
IRC, we're calling it.
IRC, okay. If the university maintains to open the campus until exams are written and the students continue to disrupt classes, will you continue with the year ahead as per normal? What will it take to end this impasse? Is the university adamant that it has to continue over and above the establishment of the IRC process?
We have to take that decision day by day, week by week. We're pleased with the progress. We paused for 2 weeks, and we indicated that we've replanned the academic year so that we can complete everything without any loss of classes or exam time, starting this last Monday. I've indicated also before that if we end up losing some of this week or some of the lectures of this week, we will have to make other plans so that those students can catch up in the time remaining. And we may find that we start offering some of the lectures as distributing notes, video lectures that have been recorded which students maybe couldn't get to class for and they'll watch online, or we may even have to compress the study break period that happens between the end of studies and the beginning of exams. But we'd have to assess that. If we ended up not being able to continue lectures for the next over 2 or 3 weeks, then we would probably have to close the campus, and we'd say we can't carry on this year. Students must go home, come back next year, and we'll resume the last semester or the last month of studies and exams next year. And that is a scenario I painted before. If we have to go that route, it will mean that the new students coming in from school will come in late. They'll start several months later than they would otherwise have started. And it will be extremely inconvenient because obviously all those people who are going to start jobs won't be able to start their jobs. So the sort of Plan Z scenario, if we can't ensure that lectures and exams are held peacefully, is that we roll over the academic year into next year.
Hi, good afternoon. Paul Becchiato, Bloomberg correspondent. Sorry, late. But just quickly, have you had any discussions with private donors? Have they come to you and made their feelings known about what is happening on campus at the moment?
By and large, so let me say not discussions, but email correspondence. By and large, the private donors have been very supportive. They're urging us to open the campus. They're urging us that the risk to our reputation and therefore their support of the university will be seriously compromised if we cannot continue and complete the academic year. But they're also understanding that this is a national issue, not just a university issue, and that in many respects this is a problem the government has to solve. And they want to help us get through this and not to become a victim of a national crisis. And so most of them have pledged their ongoing support. When I say most of them, the ones who've been in correspondence with us have pledged their ongoing support.
And what percentage do they make up of your funding?
Well, that's interesting because private donors tend to fund things that are not our core business. They fund things that we wouldn't otherwise be doing. They may fund an area of research or the construction of a new building or an outreach project to the schools. Things like that. The main funding which we get from private donors, which is part of our core funding, is financial aid for students. And of the financial aid for students, I would say probably about 100 million rand out of altogether 500 million that we're spending collectively on financial aid at UCT. Probably about 100 million is coming from financial donors, from philanthropy and from foundations each year. And there it is a bit more risky because those donors are trying to understand why it is the students that they are helping most, the students who are the poorest students, who seem to be willing to campaign and sacrifice the year in order for this larger campaign of free funding. And so there is a bit of a concern amongst those donors. But what we're saying to the donors is, firstly, don't generalize about all students. There are students who lead the protests, but there are thousands more who, while they're sympathetic with the cause of free education, are not wanting to shut down the university and not wanting to put their own studies at risk and not wanting to cost the donors more money through the loss of this year. So in that regard, we're trying to get a message out that they must continue to support the students.
Yes.
Another question from News 24. You've mentioned that 4 panel members are going to be selected for this TRC process. Is there anything else you can tell us about it, how it will work exactly, and just the general processes, or is that all you can tell us for now?
Really, the reason why we haven't done this before, because we have been committed to an IRC process for some 2 months, 6 weeks or so, long before these protests started. And I have correspondence to prove that I responded to the students 6 weeks ago to indicate that we should meet about this. But the reason we're not doing this publicly is because this has to be something which is co-owned and co-constructed. The major stakeholders have to agree on the panelists. They need to agree on the scope and the terms of reference, on the timelines, on the processes, whether everyone who wants to make a submission can make a submission, or whether there would be written submissions and the panelists would select a sample of those submissions in order to make it manageable. So all of those details need to be worked out jointly. So while I and the executive team have views on this, it wouldn't be appropriate to establish those unilaterally. That has to be done as a joint effort.
And then can I just ask, IRC stands for?
Institutional Reconciliation Commission.
So just institution.
You know, a Truth and Reconciliation Commission has a certain meaning in the world. It's usually where genocide or gross human rights violations have been committed. And it's usually a dictatorial state against innocent citizens. And I think we do a disservice to the whole global concept of TRC, Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, when we take issues like the issues that are being raised on campus and we say, and we put that into the realm of TRC. Now, for some people it's semantic, and I'm not going to go to, you know, to the wall to battle over that. But we think that a much more appropriate kind of language is an Institutional Reconciliation Commission.
I'm sorry, yesterday's meeting with stakeholders, did that help the situation at all? Or
No, that wasn't. Which
the,
meeting was
the
that?
stakeholders meeting.
Do you mean the one that the President and the Minister
Yeah.
convened? I'm afraid we couldn't get there, so UCT couldn't get to the meeting, but we were represented by other Vice-Chancellors and by the University of South Africa. I think that the statement of the President, in my view, was spot on in explaining the situation. I think that there was a missed opportunity from the Minister and the President to say, we will demonstrate urgency. And that urgency would be to say, we will find a way of working with the Judicial Commission or some alternative structure to produce an answer to this policy this year, rather than the time frame that is currently sketched out. And so the President and the Minister did not offer anything new, as far as I could see, in that process. And so in that sense, I think there was a wasted opportunity and didn't take us forward. And I would urge them to try again, not to give up on that, but to try again.
Do you think because of that missed opportunity, it's fanning the flame, so to speak?
I can't really judge that. I don't know. That was yesterday, and I don't have a sense yet of today what's happening.
Any further questions?
Well, thank you very much for coming again and for giving us an opportunity to put our side of the story.